Alright, first things first, I would like to start this video with an apology for how long it took me to upload it and in general finish it, despite all my promises of putting out a new video essay soon after the last one. The truth is I've been super swamped with both school and personal issues, so yeah, I've been pretty busy. But yeah, summer is finally here, and with it, freedom from school assignments. As such, I started working on my video essay on the parallels between Madoka Magica, Revolutionary Girl Utena, and Princess Tutu, which I've talked about on my personal blog and in some comments under my other videos. And I was already almost done with that one, but then when I started working on a chapter called The Eternal Feminine, I got a bit stuck. As I worked on my notes for it, I realized just how much there is to say about Madoka Magica and Goethe, and how maybe it was not a good idea to devolve half of a video essay that compares 3 different shows to just one of them. So I decided to leave all the Goethe notes for a second video essay that I would work on after I was done with the first one. However, I then realized that in the Goethe essay I could discuss wild speculations for the upcoming Madoka Magica movie more in depth, and that the movie is hopefully, fingers crossed, coming out in the next few months. So I decided to write this one first, so that I can be done before the next movie is out. Hopefully. It is obvious to most that Madoka Magica has been clearly inspired by German literature, particularly by Goethe's Faust. German words and literary figures pervade the series. As I highlighted in my previous video essay, Nietzsche and Freud are particularly quoted throughout both the TV series and Rebellion. As I never mentioned Goethe in my previous essay, I intend to dedicate this entire essay to dissect how 2 of his works, namely The Sorrows of Young Werther and Faust, have inspired the narrative and the themes in Madoka Magica. At the end of this essay, I will use this influence to infer what might be the themes explored in the upcoming 4th movie, namely Walpurgis no Kaiten, or Walpurgis Rising in English. All my reference will be cited in the original script, which we will find linked in the description box. Let's go. Before we can start, I think it is important to explain who Goethe actually is. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe can be best described as a polymath. The man was not only one of the most influential writers and playwrights of Western literature, but he was also a poet, a scientist, a statesman, a theater director, and a critic. The 2 works of his that I will be discussing in this essay are also arguably his 2 most famous works, namely The Sorrows of the Young Werther and Faust. The Sorrows of Young Werther is a semi-autobiographical epistolary novel that is considered emblematic of the Sturm und Drang period in German literature. Sturm und Drang is a German expression that can be loosely translated to storm and stress, and was a literary movement that took place between the late 1760s and early 1780s in Germany. The movement exalted nature, feeling, and human individualism, and sought to overthrow enlightenment and the cult of rationalism. In other words, works that fall under this definition place particular emphasis on one's feeling, even those primitive ones that can lead to violence and even suicide. In The Sorrows of Young Werther, Goethe tells us of his own unrequited love towards Charlotte Buff, who was engaged with Goethe's colleague and acquaintance, Johann Christian Kästner. In the novel, Goethe names his self-insert Werther, and Charlotte becomes Lotte, a name that he called her by in real life, and Kästner becomes Albert, Lotte's husband. The novel is told in letters written by young Werther, a sensitive and passionate man who is struggling with his feelings of unrequited love. Despite knowing that Lotte is engaged and that their love cannot be, young Werther develops a relationship with both Lotte and her fiancé. Werther is also close with Lotte's 8 younger siblings, whose care Lotte has been entrusted to by her own mother on her dying bed. The siblings enjoy having Werther around, and his relationship with Lotte grows closer and closer. However, the girl refuses to break her engagement to Albert. When Werther starts to harbor suicidal thoughts, he realizes he must take distance from the vicious cycle caused by this love triangle. Werther moves away and takes up a job with an ambassador. However, he soon becomes disgusted with the people he comes into contact with through his job, as they pettily try to climb the social ladder. After he fails to observe strict class protocols in front of nobility, Werther becomes ostracized by his own friends and colleagues. This causes him to resign. He spends a few years working on his drawing skills and turns down the chance of joining the army. In the meantime, Lotte and Albert have married. Yet, despite this, Werther is still in love with Lotte. He decides to move back to Valheim, where he first met Lotte, in the hope to feel again the optimism he had experienced in his youth. Back at the town, everything has changed. He finds out that a child he had drawn had died, and that the beautiful walnut trees that he so loved have been cut down. He visits Lotte and Albert often, but the situation starts to weigh heavily on him, and his suicidal thoughts come back. Werther starts to struggle with his mental health, and his behavior becomes erratic and unstable. Because of this, Albert decides to cut contact with him and urges Lotte to do the same. Lotte is first to confront her complex feelings for Werther and tries to set healthy boundaries, asking that he does not visit unless invited, and invites Werther to join them for Christmas in 5 days. However, Werther ignores her instructions and shows up unannounced the day after, while Albert is not there. Werther reads out loud his own translation of Ossian, an epic poem that describes a hero's death, and Charlotte realizes that Werther intends to end his own life. The two exchange a passionate kiss for the first time. Horrified by her actions and grief-stricken, Lotte locks herself in a room till Werther leaves. Werther's joy at realizing Charlotte does love him only confirms his plan to end his life rather than live without her. It is hinted that Charlotte's grief at Werther's death may have caused her to die of a broken heart. The character of Werther embodies the fatal effects of thinking in absolutes and being unable to display a certain degree of nuance. Not gonna lie, I personally kind of love this novel, and one of the reasons why is because of how relevant it still is, despite having been written 250 years ago. Werther is a young man who ultimately is blind to Lotte's desire to be friends with him. He is incapable of viewing Lotte as more than just the object of his romantic desires, despite the fact that she is her own individual. When Lotte vows that she will not break off her engagement, Werther views her friendship as a sort of trap. Basically, he bemoans being friend-zoned and blames Lotte for being his friend, ignoring the pain that this situation is causing to Lotte. Indeed, she cares about him, and throughout the novel, Lotte goes to great lengths to save their friendship, which ultimately never satisfies Werther. Werther is akin to a good guy. He views women he does not like as lesser than, and women he likes as the recipient of his affections, despite whatever they may want. This is highlighted by Goethe's writing, who is actually calling Werther out in a way, despite being quite forgiving towards the young man. Some of the women that Goethe writes in the novel are interesting, all-rounded characters, intellectual equals of men who have tremendous resolve and great emotional depth. All of this is kinda lost on young Werther, who ignores his own mother because she scolds him, yet he still asks for her money, and he also sympathizes with the man who assaulted the widow, a strong and independent woman, allow me the expression, whose name Werther never even bothers to learn, limiting her to her marital status, the widow, her connection with men. And now, on to Faust. Goethe worked on this play for most of his life. Drafts can be traced back to Goethe's teenage years. The earliest version of the play, known as Faust, was developed between 1772 and 1775, when Goethe would have been in his 20s. The play is divided into 2 parts. Part 1 was initially published in 1806, with a final version released in 1828/29. Goethe finally finished writing Part 2 in 1832, in his 80s. Part 2 was published posthumously in 1832. The plot of Faust is long and complex, and the actual play, when acted integrally, takes 13 hours. I will try to be as brief as possible. If you're Goethe fans, please forgive me for skipping certain scenes, themes, characters, etc. Thank you. Let's start with part 1. Part 1 of Faust opens in heaven. There, Mephistopheles, aka Satan, bets with God that he can lure God's most intelligent and favorite human astray. The man in question is Dr. Faust, a righteous medieval scholar who strives to learn all that can be known. God accepts the bet, claiming that Satan won't win. In the next scene, he meets Faust, old and hopeless. Disillusioned with modern scientific, humanistic, and religious studies, the man turns to magic. Frustrated by his failures and the impossibility to reach his ultimate goal, he ponders suicide. Mephistopheles appears to Faust first under the guise of a black dog, who turns into human form. Mephistopheles offers a deal to Faust. The devil will serve him in life, and Faust will serve him in the afterlife. Faust is tempted, but he is scared of losing his soul. To avoid this fate, Faust makes a wager. If Mephistopheles can grant Faust an experience of transcendence on earth, a moment so blissful that he wishes to remain in it forever, ceasing to strive further, then he will instantly die and serve the devil in hell. Mephistopheles accepts the wager. The rest of part 1 details Faust's tragic romance with Margaret, a beautiful, innocent, poor young woman with whom Faust falls madly in love, and who in turn falls in love with him. In order to consummate their relationship, Margaret gives her mother a sleeping potion concocted by the devil and given to her by Faust. This action is the beginning of Margaret's end. The potion kills her mother. Margaret becomes pregnant with Faust's child, and the community shuns her for having sex outside of marriage. Margaret's brother Valentine, a soldier, seeks to take revenge on the man who has led his sister into ruin. Faust wins the duel with the help of the devil and flees the murder scene. In his dying moments, Valentine curses Margaret and blames her for his misfortune. Months later, Faust and Mephistopheles reappear on Walpurgis night, a celebration held on the summit of Brocken in the devil's honor, attended by witches, warlocks, and all manners of evil spirits. The two watch an amateurish phantasmagoric play staged in the mountains, after which the devil reveals to Faust that Margaret is miserable and despairing in prison for killing her newborn child. Faust curses the devil for concealing this news and vows then and there to free his beloved. Indeed, after Faust had murdered her brother Valentine, Margaret has become haunted by her guilt and her yearning for innocence, and the reason she killed her child was to free it from this world. Though Faust attempts to free her from prison, Margaret refuses, recognizing Faust's companion for who he is. In a state of delirious grief, Margaret starts praying to save her soul. As Faust and Mephistopheles run away from her cell, a voice from the heaven announces that Margaret is saved and will spend eternity in heaven despite her sins. Part 2 of Faust is quite different from Part 1, and the focus shifts from Faust's soul to social phenomena such as psychology, history, politics, as well as to philosophical and mystical topics. Part 2 is packed with events, but I will be as brief as possible, and forgive me, homunculus fans, if you exist, but I will be skipping him. Years after Margaret's death, Faust suggests a short-term solution to the young emperor to solve the social, military, and economic issues distressing the imperial realm. During the celebrations in honor of Faust and his idea to dig up treasures buried long ago by people fleeing from the barbarian invasion of Rome, Faust and Mephistopheles get the emperor to introduce paper money in the empire, which creates a false sense of prosperity. In the celebrations, the emperor asks for Helen of Troy and her lover Paris to be summoned by the magicians. Let's just say that a lot of stuff happens, and Faust and the devil basically travel back in time to ancient Greece on the night of classical Walpurgis night, when all the figures from Greek mythology are roaming: griffins, sphinxes, harpies, nymphs, and satyrs. Again, a lot happens, and Faust falls in love with Helen, and the two marry and have a child, Euphorion. The child dies and Helen chooses to leave for the underworld to be with him forever. Grief-stricken, Faust claims to have one last final project. He wants to create a country. To do this, he needs a coastal fiefdom. And to achieve this, Mephistopheles suggests that Faust save the emperor from the anarchy and rebellion caused by the false sense of prosperity initiated by Faust himself all those years ago. By summoning three great warriors, the three mighty men, and by deploying black magic, Faust and Mephistopheles preserve the emperor's rule and earn their desired reward, a fiefdom by the sea. Many years pass. Faust, now 100 years old, has spent half a lifetime dedicated to his project of creating a technological utopia out of land currently under the sea. He has ruled his fiefdom wisely and justly. However, one little property remains beyond his reach, a cottage belonging to an old married couple. Driven by obsession, he asks Mephistopheles to unjustly seize the property. Despite being asked not to use violence, the devil and his mighty men kill the couple. Despite his tremendous guilt, Faust decides to bring his plan to completion. As he dies, Faust's final vision is of the utopia he hopes he has built on Earth. It is a vision not of domination, but of justice, prosperity, and love. The vision is so beautiful that he says, "Tarry a while, you are so fair," thus losing his initial wager, for he has finally experienced a moment so blissful that he wishes to remain in it forever. However, in the afterlife, angels come to claim Faust's soul, claiming that while Faust may have lost the wager, Mephistopheles has ultimately lost his bet with God. Faust's restlessness saved him. He was never satisfied with mere idle pleasures, but always wanted to improve himself and in the end to improve his world. He was far from a perfect man, but he did strive to harmonize with the whole world. Part 2 ends with Mary instructing Margaret's soul to lead Faust into eternity. Overall, while Part 1 deals with human love, Part 2 deals with earthly powers and control over human forces. In my previous video essay on Homura, I briefly mentioned a quote by Urobuchi himself on love, which goes, "When I try to write love, it only turns into horror. Thinking about it with a clear head, feeling such deep emotions to some other person you don't even know is truly a terrifying thing. I wonder if love isn't a manifestation of madness in some way." This quote resonates deeply with the fate of young Werther. His love for Lotte is the main theme of the novel and is the main catalyst that leads to his downfall. I believe Homura to be similar to Werther in many ways. At the beginning of the story, Werther leaves his hometown for the countryside, where he meets Lotte. Similarly, Homura meets Madoka for the first time when she starts attending her school, moving away from her old life. Both Werther and Homura are insecure and plagued by self-hating and suicidal thoughts. They are both sensitive and passionate, and both go down a path of self-destruction in the name of love. Werther is head over heels for Lotte, yet sometimes he claims not even listening to what she is saying. He refuses her platonic love, and as a reader it is hard to discern Lotte's real feelings for the unreliable narrator that Werther is. While I believe that Homura is not as oblivious as Werther, I still see similarities with the young men. Gender plays a key role in Goethe's novel. Werther's inability to view Lotte as an active subject, seeing her as the mere object of his desires, is a critical flaw in his character, and a part of the reason why his passion blinds him so. As Homura and Madoka are both girls, the gender barrier that leads men to dismiss women as agents rather than objects is absent. However, the more Homura repeats the same month over and over, the more she seems to lose track of who Madoka really is. As they talk less and less and, in Homura's own words, drift apart, the Madoka in Homura's memories becomes detached from the Madoka in every timeline. The version of Madoka that Homura loves and wants to protect becomes an idealized idea, a distant memory, and Homura is dismissive of Madoka in the latest timeline, the one that takes place in the series. She barely listens to her, calls her stupid for not heeding her warnings, ignores her fears and confusion and pain, and is condescending towards her. Reliving the same month over and over again has led her to develop a completely different moral system than the rest of the girls. She knows that she can redo it as many times as it takes, and her actions can be erased. And I think this is completely understandable. I can imagine that reliving the same month over and over and having similar compensations over and over may have led Homura to develop a sense of unreality, like playing a video game. In these circumstances, she is in a similar position to Werther and becomes unable to see the person she loves as that, a person. Where both Homura and Werther obsess over and agonize for the girl they love and cannot have/save, they struggle to take her agency and personhood into account. After Madoka asks Homura to save her from her own stupidity, Homura literally stops explaining the situation to her in every loop and tries to do everything by herself, trying not to involve Madoka, ask for her advice or help. This makes sense. Homura is traumatized and trying to respect Madoka's dying wish. However, she is failing in taking into account what Madoka in every loop may want, and ultimately fails to see Madoka as an equal, as an agent. In my previous video essay, Beyond Good and Evil, I discussed how Homura displays a Freudian concept, namely the compulsion to repeat. In Freudian terms, this compulsion can be defined as the desire to return to an earlier state of things. However, as previously discussed, this is impossible. Once lived, a moment in time is lost forever. Throughout the series and the movie, Homura desperately and childishly clings to her happy days with the girl she loves and who gave her so much. In a similar fashion, well away from Valheim, Werther longs to go back to that town, where, despite his pining, he feels he was truly happy. But no matter how many times Homura repeats the past, she can never ever have the same connection and the same moments with Madoka ever again. Despite moving back to Valheim, Werther does not find happiness. Everything's changed. People died. Lotte is married. Both Werther and Homura agonize for a past that can never be again, and for the idealized future they felt was taken away from them. Madoka was supposed to win against the Walpurgis Knight and be by Homura's side forever. Lotte was supposed to break off her engagement and be with Werther. The happy days of Werther talking with Lotte, their feet touching under the table, heart beating fast after seeing her face, the little flirtatious notes, are moments that can never be repeated again, lost to time forever. In a similar fashion, Madoka and Homura's blissful moments of training together, walking home from school, sharing a meal, chatting after school, are lost. Even when Homura rewrites the universe and traps Madoka's human form in a world of her creation, all is different from before. Similarly to Werther, the situation leads Homura back to suicidality. We see it when the Clara dolls, Homura's true feelings, jump off a building surrounded by shoes. As most of you might know, leaving one's shoes behind indicates suicidal intent. The last shot of rebellion is of Homura jumping off a ledge into the darkness. Even in Faust, the concept of the past as a moment that is forever gone is mentioned by Mephistopheles when he complains about Faust's constant strife. Past, a stupid word. Then why? Past and pure nothing, complete monotony. What use is this eternal creation, creating to achieve annihilation? There, it's past. What's to read in it? It's just the same as if it never lived, yet chases round in circles as if it did. I'd prefer to have the everlasting void. When The Sorrows of Young Werther came out, it is rumored that the book was the catalyst for a spike in suicides. It is reported that young men from the period emulated the way Werther killed himself in the book, which led to the book being banned in several places. Indeed, the term Werther effect has come to be another name for the phenomenon of copycat suicide. This phenomenon has been widely studied in sociology, and it states that a spike in suicide will occur after a widely publicized suicide. The reason why I am discussing this phenomenon is to lay the background to understand just how deep-rooted the book is when we discuss suicide, especially in fiction. Goethe's Faust and Goethe in general has so clearly had a deep influence on Madoka Magica, which is why I think that it is plausible that Homura's suicidality, both at the beginning and at the end of the series, has been narratively inspired by Werther. After all, how does Werther kill himself? In the collective memory, this is Werther's legacy, the young man who killed himself after being rejected by the woman he loved. The young man, full of love and anguish and longing, whose unrequited love led to the ultimate folly. In sociology, the name Werther goes hand in hand with suicide. When I try to write love, it only turns into horror. Thinking about it with a clear head, feeling such deep emotions to some other person you don't even know, is truly a terrifying thing. I wonder if love isn't a manifestation of madness in some ways. Urobuchi's view on love is so clearly reflected in Werther's character. After all, Werther really did not know Lotte at all. He barely listened to her, ignored her wishes to have a platonic relationship, and forced his feelings on her. He becomes obsessed with Lotte, can only think of her. His behavior becomes erratic and unstable. His own friends do not recognize him anymore. It is no surprise to me that when Urobuchi had to write a character whose sole motivation is love, that character would end up as a mirror of Werther. Faust is at the core of the narrative in Madoka Magica. I mean, a devil not from this world who grants wishes in exchange for one's soul, and the struggle of a human to not succumb to despair and sin? Come on now. Goethe's Faust pervades the narrative and symbolism throughout the series. I would honestly argue that Madoka Magica can be interpreted as a retelling of Faust, with only a few changes. God does not exist, and the devil is an apathetic utilitarian creature. Faust is not a genius man, but every single little girl who turned into a magical girl from the beginning of time. Just like Faust always strived and struggled, and he tried to improve his world, in the show, QB implies that the only reason human society has advanced is because of the hopes and dreams of magical girls throughout the millennia. Faust's restlessness is, in my opinion, the most evident in Homura. Basically, Madoka Magica is Faust if Dr. Faust had gotten himself stuck in a time loop to save his beloved Margaret, goaded by Mephistopheles. But more on this later. The show makes it clear that this is a retelling of Faust from the very beginning, as I will show you in the last chapter. One of the many ways in which the show forces us to connect what we are watching to Goethe's play is through German. The language is almost omnipresent in the show, in songs, speech, and even the runes that appear throughout the series are based on German. Actually, the story of how these runes came to be directly links back to Goethe. The runes were devised by Inukuri, the artist duo behind most of the art in Madoka Magica, and were deciphered by fans in 2011, after months and months of joint efforts and trial and error. According to puelamagi.net, the general correct assumption was that each rune corresponded to a letter in German, but at the time it was still possible that the text was encrypted, a newly constructed language, or even that they were just scattered completely at random. German was chosen as the most likely candidate because it appeared as direct quotes from Goethe's Faust, and the cotton balls, Pringle Man, Anthony's were observed to be chanting in German. After some urging to use the Faust quotes as a Rosetta Stone, an anonymous found and posted a line of runes which matched one of the quotes. The runes have allowed fans to discover the name of the witches before they were revealed, and lo and behold, a great number of them are German. Some of the witches with German names include Gertrude, Kirsten, Isabel, and Patricia. There are 4 more witches with German names, and all 4 of them are key characters and are all connected to Goethe. This is gonna be a doozy, so sit back and relax. Charlotte. The Witch of Sweets. Her nature is tenacity. She desires everything. She will never give up. Though she is capable of creating infinite amounts of any dessert she desires, she is unable to make the cheese that she loves most. One could easily catch her off guard with a piece of cheese. This is Nagisa's witch name, and to me, her name is a clear reference to Lotte, Werther's love interest. Her full name in the book was in fact Charlotte. The 2 characters are quite different, but in my opinion they present some similarities. In The Sorrows of Young Werther, Charlotte's mother dies of illness, leaving Lotte to take care of her many younger siblings. Nagisa also lost her mother to illness. When Kyubi came to her, she wished for a cheesecake to share with her dying mother in the hospital, immediately witching out when she realized that she could have instead wished to cure her mother. Just like Lotte drove Werther to his death, by head wound I may add, Charlotte the Witch drove Mommy to hers. I must admit I do not see any more connections between Charlotte and Lotte, but considering how Urabuchi is clearly a Goethe stan, I imagine he could not resist naming at least one of the witches after Werther's love interest, but this is just conjectures. Octavia von Seckendorf, the Mermaid Witch. Her nature is to fall in love. Looking for the feelings that moved her so long ago, she moves with the entire concert hall. Her fortune only turns under the weight of memories and no longer moves towards the future. Nothing will reach her any longer. She will come to know nothing more. She simply allows no one to disturb her minions playing. Sayaka's witch form has a name that at first glance has nothing to do with Goethe. However, it takes very little digging to see how our dear Magica Quartet managed to make it all about Goethe again. Sayaka's witch name can be divided into 2 parts, a name, Octavia, and a surname, von Seckendorf. The name Octavia might play into Sayaka's musical theme, namely as an octave. It's her surname where Goethe comes into play. According to puelamagi.net, Carl Sigmund von Seckendorf was a German poet who was inspired by Goethe. He enjoyed composing music for several of his poems before they were even published, and translated The Sorrows of Young Werther into French. However, Goethe thought little of his work. I find this deeply fascinating, not only that Sayaka's witch form would be linked to The Sorrows of Young Werther, but that it would be linked to a translation that left the original author unimpressed, as well as compositions. Just like in the novel, Sayaka is stuck in a love triangle with 2 other people she considers friends, who are dating. In this situation, Sayaka would be Werther, Kyosuke Lotte, and Hitomi would be Albert. While not the entire reason why, Sayaka's unrequited feelings for Kyosuke are the catalyst that start the chain of events which will eventually lead to Sayaka's demise. The reason why I find it fascinating that von Seckendorf would be the one referenced in her name is that the triangle Sayaka is involved in has such lower stakes compared to the one Werther was in. Sayaka is a middle school child. While the rejection might sting, she should be able to move forward and leave it all behind. This sentiment is echoed by the girl's teacher in episode 11.
さやかちゃんね、友達と恋愛絡みでちょっといろいろあったらしいの。その子もかなりダメージ背負っちゃってね。普通なら甘酸っぱい思い出で済むとこなんだけど、こういう結末になっちゃうとね。
And it's not even Sayaka's unrequited feelings that lead to her demise. It is the knowledge that she can never confess to him, for she is a zombie. The fact that she realizes that she was indeed selfish when she contracted, because she did hope her choice would be rewarded with a fairy tale-like happy ending. It was the trauma of Mummy's death, the fear of having signed up for the same fate, the understanding that she was tricked into selling her soul, the disillusionment of her heroic ideals. When she contracted, she stated that there was no way she would regret it, as even though Kyosuke might never know what she did for him, she will be out there saving people, and there is no greater honor. As she is confronted with her own petty jealousy and feelings of hopelessness and dissociation, she encounters Misogynist 1 and Misogynist 2 on a train. After fighting for her life to protect others, hearing two men talk about women in such derogatory terms is the last drop. What am I fighting for? She wonders out loud before the scene is cut, implying that she harms, or kills, hopefully, the two men. This is what leads her to despair, not Kyosuke's unrequited love, but the betrayal of her own ideals, regretting healing Kyosuke, regretting risking her life to save others. The self-hatred she feels for even just thinking these things. In a way, her struggles are similar to those of Werther's. The young man also had a tendency for black and white thinking. This kind of thinking is typical of youth, and it can be seen so clearly displayed by chronically online teenagers and adults who never grew up. Unlike Werther, Sayaka never even made her feelings for her crush explicit. Kyosuke never knew, never suspected anything. Lotte was aware of how Werther felt, and outwardly rejected him. In tone with her youth, only 14, Sayaka despaired and agonized all on her own. She never confessed, never hinted at her feelings, and her fear of rejection, on the basis of being a body with no soul, paralyzed her. In this sense, I can see why they would give Octavia the surname of a musical composer who wrote a mediocre translation of Werther. Another important element that calls back to Goethe in Sayaka's witch form has to do with her design. Octavia displays a fishtail, which has been widely interpreted as a connection to the tale of the Little Mermaid. Just like in the most famous version of the tale by Andersen, Sayaka made a huge sacrifice for a guy who never knew the truth, and who also ended up together with someone else. And just like the Little Mermaid, Sayaka's actions end up causing her demise, and instead of sea foam, she turns into a witch. The way this is connected to Goethe is rooted in the origins of the Little Mermaid. When Hans Christian Andersen wrote The Little Mermaid, he was inspired by the legend of the Melusine, a figure of European folklore, a female spirit of fresh water. She was usually depicted as having the upper body of a beautiful woman and lower body of a fish or serpent, depending on the version. In 1807, Goethe published his own spin on this tale, titled The New Melusine. Goethe's version was an adaptation of the medieval Melusine tale, a narrative with known authorship and a literary genesis that could be traced back to the work of Jean d'Arras in the late 14th century France. In this version, the Melusine is cursed by her own mother to take the shape of a half-snake every Saturday, as punishment for having betrayed her own father. She marries a human man and asks him to never look at her on Saturdays. However, pressured by his family and friends, he spies on her, then betrays her, and the Melusine remains stuck in her monstrous form. However, in Goethe's versions of the tale, there are certain changes. The Melusine takes shapes of a tiny elf-like creature who can shape-shift into human size, and the man she marries is not the typical fairy tale prince. He is not an aristocrat like in many others' retelling of the tale, and he is not as respectful of the Melusine before being peer-pressured. In Goethe's tale, he is the unreliable narrator, a fallible human who was despised by readers. The new Melusine has been mostly ignored by critics for a long time, and it was very hard for me to find much information about it online, especially as someone who does not speak German. According to an article by Renata Schellenberg, some elements present in Goethe's retelling that should be worth more notes from academics are size-shifting mythological characters, flawed narrator, errant human behavior, intimate physical interactions, and bad decision-making. As I see it, most of these elements are also present in Sayaka's storyline and her heartbreak related to Kyosuke and Hitomi. Kriemhild Gretchen, Witch of Salvation. Her nature is mercy. She absorbs any life on the planet into her newly created heaven, her barrier. The only way to defeat this witch is to make the world free of misfortune. If there's no grief in this world, she will believe this world is already a heaven. Alright, this one was my favorite and, to be honest, the easiest one to link to Goethe. Kriemhild Gretchen is the name given to Madoka's witch form. Again, we shall divide her name into two parts. Let's start with Kriemhild and then move on to Gretchen. The name Kriemhild is an old Germanic name that is related to Norse mythology. In the German epic poem The Song of the Nibelungs, Kriemhild is a beautiful woman who marries a Siegfried, who gets killed by her own family. Years after the fact, despite being married to another man, Kriemhild still manages to exact her revenge and gets a bunch of people killed, herself included. Madoka's witch form is still causing death and devastation, just like Kriemhild did, but she does not believe so, and her motive is the exact opposite of revenge. However, the name was not entirely randomly assigned to Madoka. Her dear friend Goethe loved German and Norse mythology, as every good romantic did, and in The Sorrows of Young Werther, Lotte and Werther exchanged their one and only kiss while reading out loud Werther's own translation of Ossian, a mythical narrator and author of a cycle of epic poems. Another link between Madoka and Kriemhild lies in the etymology of the latter's name. The name Kriemhild is derived from the Old German words Krimo, means mask, and Hild, meaning battle. According to puelamagi.net, some have come to believe that the mask shown at the end of the ending credits is actually Kriemhild's face, considering Kriemhild's meaning of battle mask. And something I personally found very interesting was how even when looking at the Norse version of the name, rather than the German one, we can find similarities in Madoka's story in the etymology. In Norse mythology, Kriemhild was named Gudrun, which comes from the Old Norse name Guðrun, I don't know how to pronounce it, meaning God's secret lore, derived from the element Guð, meaning God, and Run, meaning secret lore, rune. And then there's Gretchen. Where to even start with this one? So we went through the whole plot of Faust, and throughout it I referred to Faust's love interest in the first half of the poem as Margaret, remember? What I purposefully avoided doing was referring to her with the nickname that Faust used for her after the first night together, which is Gretchen. Margaret/Gretchen as a character presents striking similarities with Madoka's, and I believe that some of these similarities can even help unveil what might happen in the fourth movie. Here are all points of similarities between Madoka and Gretchen that I found. Margaret/Gretchen is a pure, kind-hearted and innocent girl who is led to ruin by the person who loved her the most. I believe the love story between Faust and Margaret resembles the one between Madoka and Homura. Homura's love for Madoka, her constant repeating of the same month, her devotion, they all cursed Madoka to bear a heavier and heavier karma, making her more likely to be chosen by the incubators, and enabling her to make a wish so big it allowed her to rewrite the entire universe and become a concept. Had Homura never loved Madoka, her fate would not have been so cruel. She would have just died, she would not have stopped existing altogether. Similarly, had Faust never loved Margaret, she would not have suffered one of the worst fates a medieval woman could suffer. At the very end of Faust, Gretchen is the one who is tasked with leading Faust's soul into heaven, where they can be together in God's grace at last. Madoka's role after the main series is similar to that of Gretchen's at the end of the play. However, while Gretchen is a penitent who obeys God, Madoka is more akin to a god herself. So I found this info on puelamagi.net as usual, and I found it quite fascinating. Some studies suggest that Faust refers to the girl as Margaret, meaning Pearl, at the beginning of the play because of her purity and innocence, and changes to the diminutive Gretchen after their intercourse to point out her spoiled purity. In the same way, the fact that this witch is named Gretchen rather than Margaret could represent the corruption of Madoka's soul. Another interesting piece of info that I got from the same source was about the appearance of Madoka's witch form as resembling that of broken specters, described on Wikipedia as the magnified and apparently enormous shadows of an observer cast in mid-air upon any type of a cloud opposite a strong light source. The phenomenon can appear on any misty mountainside, cloud bank, or be seen from an aircraft, but the frequent fogs and low altitude accessibility of the Brocken, the highest peak of the Harz Mountains in Germany, have created a local legend from which the phenomenon draws its name. Both in German folklore and in Goethe's Faust, this same mount is the one onto which the celebration for Walpurgis Night takes place. The Walpurgis Nacht. The stage-constructing witch. Her nature is helplessness. She symbolizes the fool who continuously spins in circles. The witch's mysteries have been handed down through the course of history. Her appellation is Walpurgisnacht. She will continue to rotate aimlessly through the world until she completely changes the whole of this age into a drama. When the doll's usual upside-down position reaches the top part of the witch, she completely rolls over the civilization on the ground in a flash through her gale-like flight. And now, onto the prima donna herself. I feel like at this point of the essay, you all can tell how her name is once again calling back to Goethe. So let's talk about the Walpurgis Night as a celebration. This night is still widely celebrated in Europe. I live in Finland and Vappu is quite a big day here. Funnily enough, I only connected that Vappu comes from Walpurga while writing this script, and my life is now forever changed. Anyway, Saint Walpurga Night is celebrated on the eve of the day of Saint Walpurga, an abbess from the 8th century. According to Wikipedia, Saint Walpurga was hailed by the Christians of Germany for battling pest, rabies, and whooping cough, as well as against witchcraft. Christians prayed to God through the intercession of Saint Walpurga in order to protect themselves from witchcraft, as Saint Walpurga was successful in converting the local populace to Christianity. In some parts of Europe, people continue to light bonfires on Saint Walpurga's Eve in order to ward off evil spirits and witches. The Walpurgis Night is an incredibly fascinating witch. In the production notes for the show, we see a sketch of how the Walpurgis would appear in episode 10, with some scribbled notes. I would like to focus on two of these notes. The first one is the one above the sketch, the one that says, rainbow-colored light, broken spectre. We already discussed the broken specters when discussing Kriemhild Gretchen, so I won't repeat myself. The second note that I want to focus on here is the one on the right, which describes the nature of the Walpurgis. As the Google Translate translation is not the best, I'd like to use the one that I found on puelamagi.net. She will turn all of fate's misfortune to nothing. She will flood the earth with magic and take all of humankind into her play. A moving stage construction. If everything is a play, no unhappy things will exist. It may be a tragedy, but it will all be part of the script. The play stops on Walpurgisnacht, and the earth does not turn even once more. The story will not change. Tomorrow and the day after is the night of Walpurgis. Let's look at the Walpurgis description in the witch cards and in the production notes. Let me put forth a question. Does she remind you of anyone? I would like to leave this question for the last chapter, so let's focus on other aspects of these descriptions. Something that I find very interesting is the way that the Walpurgis intends to turn the world into a play. And isn't this exactly what this show actually is? Episode 1 literally opens to curtains rising. I saw many claim that Madoka Magica reads like a Greek tragedy, and while I agree, I'd argue that it reads like a Greek tragedy because Goethe was so fascinated by the classical world, and his own play goes back to Greek tragedies. As a consequence, any reiteration of Faust, when done well, understanding the source, will be reminiscent of them. Greek tragedies follow a specific structure, typically divided into 5 parts: a prologue, a parod or parados, an episode, stasimon, and exode or exodos. Music was a fundamental part of Greek tragedies, with the chorus being tasked with singing a sort of commentary on what was happening, often passing moral judgment. Most Greek tragedies revolved around the fall or redemption of the hero, with pride being the likely weakness. I will now list some observations and trivia about the Walpurgis Nights that call back to Goethe. However, I will reserve most of my opinions for the last chapter. The guidebook describing the witch's labyrinth design contains the line, "Everything in this world is fake. My life is nothing more than a drama that you penned. Please prove it. Faust is on show." According to witch animator and designer Ino Curry, Walpurgis Knight's and Cream-Lit Gretchen's silhouettes are supposed to make a pair. If we see Cream-Heeled Gretchen as Margaret, the fact that she can be the other half of the Walpurgis is interesting. Remember how, at the end of the first Walpurgis Night, Faust and Mephistopheles attend a mediocre play, after which Faust learns the truth about Margaret's destiny? Yeah. The Walpurgis Night presents herself with familiars who take the shape of former magical girls, dancing around her on her cogs. Just like witches dance around bonfires on Walpurgis Night, so do the magical girls, the first stage of a witch. Apparently, originally, Sayaka, Kyoko, and Mami's silhouettes were supposed to have appeared as the Walpurgis Night minions in episode 11 and 12. However, the idea was trashed last minute, though it still survives in the manga. Everything transient is but a symbol. The insufficient here finds fulfillment. The indescribable here becomes deed. The eternal feminine draws on high. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I started writing this essay after going down a rabbit hole while writing another one. The topic that started it all was the concept of the eternal feminine, a concept mentioned at the very end of Faust. The more I researched it, the more unhinged I felt, as I was able to draw so many connections that I had previously missed. The thing is, I started researching the Eternal Feminine because I believe it connects the three shows that I was comparing, namely Revolutionary Girl Utena, Princess Tutu, and Madoka Magica. As the concept first appears in Goethe's Faust, I had to explain why Faust is relevant, especially in the case of Madoka Magica. As I was merely drawing comparisons between Faust and Puelamagi Madoka Magica, I wondered, how have I not mentioned this in my previous video essay, and why would I mention all of this now, including my predictions for the next movie? Should I just make a new video essay? And here we are. I'm not gonna lie, when I first drew these comparisons I was like, wow, such big brain take. I bet no one's ever connected the Eternal Feminine to Madoka Magica and the magical girl genre before. But yeah, that was my hubris talking, for I found out that this wonderful blog post has mentioned how the Eternal Feminine and Faust were a brilliant choice to include in a magical girl show. Well, bear with me, I expand on the thoughts on this blog post. Side note, I will try to be brief and give just a holistic overview because this concept is more central to my other video essay. However, it is impossible to discuss Goethe and Madoka Magica without at least addressing it. The concept of the Eternal Feminine is first presented in the last lines of Goethe's Faust. Various translations include the terms woman, eternal, and woman, soul. As I previously mentioned, Goethe worked on the play his whole life. As such, it is safe to say that it is his magnum opus and the culmination of his philosophy. For him to end the play with such lines has troubled scholars for centuries. What did he mean by eternal feminine? Why did he change Faust's fate at all? In other versions of the story, Faust is damned. Researching the eternal feminine was tough, I swear to God. It is a nebulous, ineffable concept that has been mentioned and studied by all kinds of scholars, and I actually found myself on a couple of conservative and transphobic blog posts by mistake, which was not very nice, I tell ya. Overall, the definition of the eternal feminine that I agree with the most is that it's an archetype of womanhood based on Western tradition. While women have historically been oppressed in the West, as we live in a patriarchy, it is easy to forget that this oppression has not always manifested itself in a clear-cut, woman inferior, man superior kind of way. In the European Middle Ages, the Virgin Mary was the most important saint, and female saints were honored just as much as male ones. Even Jesus was described in woman-like terms as a nurturing mother. In the Italian literary movement of the Dolce Stil Novo, in the 13th and 14th century, women had, I'd say, a central role in a way. Poetry from this school is marked by adoration of the human form, incorporating vivid descriptions of female beauty and frequently comparing the desired woman to a creature from paradise. The woman is described as an angel or as a bridge to God. I have not found a connection between the Eternal Feminine and the Dolce Stil Novo online, but as an Italian myself, I could not help but draw this comparison. Either way, Western culture is full of this patriarchal contradiction. Women are either saints or they are witches. Either they are pure, virginal, motherly, self-sacrificing, or they are devilish, erotic, manipulative, and cruel. Under the Western patriarchy, a woman can only exist to inspire or take care of men, or as a tempting force of evil. However, it is important to highlight how the Eternal Feminine, if understood as the archetype of an ideal woman under Western patriarchy, does not completely lack agency of free will. By name, the Eternal Feminine of Faust is everlasting womanhood, connoting the qualities thought to belong to the female gender, but her essential nature should be discerned through her deeds, which present her as a force of immense power, agency, and autonomy. She is not a mute symbol pointing to abstractions of gender allotted to her through the patriarchal legacy. She is dynamic and active, moving the drama in its final moments to a definite conclusion. So, is this a feminist, progressive concept, or is it a misogynistic, conservative one? My answer would be both and neither. Feminism and misogyny are two concepts that have a very modern definition, and it would be completely anachronistic to assign them to the past. My view of Goethe and his works falls within this paradigm. While in both The Sorrows of Young Werther and Faust, Goethe presented a progressive view of women and highlighted the way in which men mistreat them and rob them of their agency and individuality, he also only really respected women who acted within the domestic sphere and made comments about how women should not pursue the arts. In her revolutionary feminist work, The Second Sex, Simone de Beauvoir addresses the concept of the eternal feminine, mainly to debunk it. De Beauvoir goes into great detail to debunk what she refers to as the eternal feminine, or that vague and basic essence, femininity. This myth takes many forms: the sanctity of the mother, the purity of the virgin, the fecundity of the earth and of the womb, but in all cases serves to deny women's individuality and trap them inside unrealizable ideals. She uses the phrase the eternal feminine to describe all of the terrifying processes of fertility and reproduction that arose from male discomfort with the fact of his birth and the inevitability of his death. As the author of human history, man has conflated woman with her womb. He has lumped all of those mysterious processes of life and reminders of death, which both confuse and frighten him, under a single dismissive myth. De Beauvoir points out that just as there is no such thing as the eternal masculine, there is no such thing as the eternal feminine. Or, to put it differently, there is no essence, only experience. All beings, de Beauvoir insists, have the right to define their own existences, rather than labor under some vague notion of femininity. The reason why I think it's brilliant to base a magical girl show on Faust, the very play that started a whole scholarly debate on the concept of the eternal feminine, lies in my interpretation of the magical girl genre as a means to explore the horrors of girlhood in a patriarchal society. In all magical girl shows, young girls at the cusp of adolescence are given powers and have to fight in secret. I will explore this concept in more detail in my other essay, so for now I will focus on Madoka Magica. As discussed above, in the show, it is said that the only reason why humans are still not living in caves is because of the hopes and dreams of magical girls. Yet, Madoka did not know this. Despite the presence of feminist role models for Madoka in the show, first and foremost her own mother, she did not know about the importance of women in history. This implies that despite the fact that Madoka's family dynamic disrupts the stereotypical patriarchal one, that the teacher is often making low-key progressive remarks, and the fact that Madoka is surrounded by independent and strong female friends, we can assume that their world is not so different from ours, and that they also live under a patriarchy. This is made clear in episode 8, when Sayaka meets the misogynistic pricks on the train. Sayaka sacrificed her soul for a boy. She is fighting in the shadow, getting zero recognition, just for society to still have no regard for her, for she is just a girl. If women can only be saints or witches, being a hero of justice places Sayaka in the former. But her anger at the patriarchal society she is forced to live under curses her to the latter. In Madoka Magica, all magical girls embody the dichotomy that misogynistic standards force on women. Either they fight and protect, young and beautiful and full of hope, or they are witches who bring misfortune and despair when they lose their innocence. As a character, Madoka is the eternal feminine that draws us high. She is kind, compassionate, nurturing, full of hope and innocence, and ready to sacrifice herself for others. She is meek and modest, yet brave and self-righteous. However, while in Faust this was enough to save Faust's soul, in this show it isn't. Madoka, despite all her virtues, does not draw Homura, our Faust, up high. Instead, Homura drags her down, back to earth, with her. I find this difference between Faust and Madoka Magica to be quite pivotal. It means that the play is still continuing, and that the eternal feminine might not be the answer. After all, in Faust, women who did not possess the qualities that Goethe appreciated were scorned and ridiculed by the narrative. In Madoka Magica, despite being bringers of despair and calamity, witches are shown compassion and understanding. Whereas in Faust, women either embodied the qualities of the eternal feminine or they didn't, in Madoka Magica, girls embody both, and I think that's pretty cool. Before moving on to the final part of this essay, which is really long, I'd like to briefly discuss the Wraith Arc, aka the manga that tells the story of what happened between episode 12 and Rebellion. Like every other Madoka Magica spin-off mangas, it's unclear whether it can be considered canonical or not. Personally, having read it carefully and in light of the upcoming movie, I am ambivalent on whether or not it is canon or not. Just like the ending of the Madoka Magica manga differs from the ending of the TV series, I believe that the Wraith Arc is mostly canon, but there might be some differences between what actually happened canonically and what is told in the manga. The manga is quite a short read, so I suggest you go ahead and read it for yourself, and please share your opinion in comments. The manga consists of only 9 chapters divided into 3 volumes and was written right after Rebellion aired in 2015-2016. It was illustrated by Hanokage, who also illustrated the manga that retells the plot of the show,
and the story is credited to Magica Quartet, the collaboration group consisting of 4 of the key people who worked on Madoka Magica, namely director Akiyuki Shinbu, writer Gen Urobuchi, the original character designer Ume Aoki, and the producer Atsuhiro Iwakami.
The reason why I think it is important to introduce the Wraith Arc is that it introduces some interesting ideas and characters which I believe relevant to the upcoming movie. Despite its briefness, the manga is packed with events, and retelling the whole plot would take a lot of time, so I will be brief and only discuss the parts and the elements that I believe are relevant. The first volume is the one that I mostly consider not relevant to this specific analysis. All you need to know about it is that in it, Sayaka and Kyoko keeps bickering, and Mami is at her wits' ends with them. Sayaka dies, gaily, and then Homura suddenly appears. It's volume 2 and 3 where my brain actually picked up on some interesting elements. In volume 2, Homura is working with Kyoko and Mami, and they want to take down the big wraith who killed Sayaka. Homura is not very good at relying on the other two and gets her powers stolen by the wraiths. Apparently, wraiths do not kill or harm humans like witches did, they simply suck out their emotions. Magical girls kill wraiths to avoid this from happening and purify their gems with their droppings. Because the source of a magical girl's powers are her feelings, the wraith manages to steal Homura's powers by stealing her emotions. This is where the story gets really interesting in my opinion. A wraith in the shape of Madoka appears in front of Homura, and apparently only Homura can actually see her looking like Madoka. Lots of stuff happens, and we find out that Homura lost her time manipulation powers after Madoka rewrote the universe. Instead, she gained memory manipulation magic. Whereas the time manipulation magic was stored in her shield, the memory manipulation magic is stored in her bow. This is because when she and Madoka saw each other last, their mutual feelings of love crystallized in a miracle. Long story short, when Homura gets back to Earth, she still has her shield, and this shield had a whole dimension inside of it, and inside the dimension was a witch, and wherever there is a witch, there is a Madoka. To avoid risking the world that Madoka left behind, Homura makes herself forget about the shield, as she does not want the witch inside the shield to get out and whatever. Bear with me. Because of this, throughout the whole manga, she has been doubting herself and her own memories of Madoka, which gave her big depression. Long story short, she finds a version of herself that she finds inside this shield, and she's like tempting her to just let the world be consumed by the witch that was spawned by the Wraith who absorbed the power of the shield. Yeah. That way, Madoka would be sure to come to save them and kill the witch, but Homura doesn't want to meet Madoka this way. She wants to meet Madoka again feeling proud of being by her side. And so she fights the big wraith, gets her shield, turns back time, Madoka helps from the sky. As a consequence, the shield, which was the only proof that Homura had of Madoka's existence, breaks. She goes back in time to right after Sayaka's death, before she lost her powers, and then we see the scenes that we saw at the end of episode 12. However, it is revealed that Kyuubi kept one fragment of the shield and he intends to experiment on Homura, which, as we know, will be the plot of Rebellion. Okay, now that we got this convoluted plot and main elements out of the way, let's move on to the Walpurgis no Kaiten speculation, please. Don't tremble, let this look, let this clasping hands tell you what's inexpressible. To give oneself wholly and feel a joy that must be eternal. Eternal! Its end would bring despair. No, no end, no end. To discuss Walpurgis Rising, we must go back to the very beginning. As I previously mentioned, the show begins with curtains opening like at the beginning of a play, revealing the first line of text in Faust, written in the runes that we previously discussed. This story is a play. Just like Faust begins in heaven, with the bet between God and Mephistopheles, the first shot of Madoka Magica after the curtains open is not set on Earth. We see the Walpurgis night silhouettes right after the words Prologue im Himmel, 2011. After that, the curtains do not close. They do not close at the end of episode 12, nor at the end of the second recap movie, Eternal, nor at the end of the Rebellion. So here is my theory on how to read this show and what we may expect in the upcoming movie. My theory makes more sense if we look at the series as a trilogy, rather than as a series and a movie, which incidentally is how I always claim it works best, pacing-wise. I believe that the first two movies, the 12-episode series, are a retelling of part 1 of Faust, whereas Rebellion and Walpurgis no Kaiten is part 2. Here is my reasoning. In part 1 of Faust, the main conflict is about human love. Throughout part 1, Faust's actions cause his beloved to fall into disgrace, suffering probably the worst fate a medieval woman could face. She has sex before marriage, ends up pregnant, causes the death of her own mother and of a male relative who curses her, her reputation is ruined forever, and she is sentenced to death for infanticide. It is, I may say, a fate worse than death. Homura's devotion and love for Madoka have similar consequences in the sense that they increase Madoka's karma, making her more and more of a target for the incubators and granting her the power to rewrite the world, sacrificing her existence. Had Homura never contracted, Madoka would have just died. At the end of part 1, Faust tries to free Margaret from prison, but she recognizes Mephistopheles for who he is, a devil, and prays for her salvation, which she is granted. We see Margaret again at the very end of the play, where she is referred to as a penitent, and it is only through her intercession with the Virgin Mary that Faust is allowed into heaven and his soul is saved. Just like Margaret is given the role to lead Faust into heaven, Madoka leads the souls of the magical girls who are about to give in to despair into the love cycle. I do believe Madoka is given this role at the end of the series as yet another callback to Margaret, as if her witch name was not enough of a giveaway. However, I must add another influence for Madoka's state of apotheosis other than Margaret, namely Sailor Moon, specifically Sailor Cosmos. I am no expert on Sailor Moon, but the similarities are too striking not to mention them. Entropy versus the Chaos Cauldron, Ultimate Madoka and Sailor Cosmos, not to mention the time travel to change the past. I will leave a link to the fan wiki entry on Sailor Cosmos so you can read about it for yourself. As I mentioned, I do not feel qualified enough to draw comparisons as I only watched a bit of Sailor Moon when I was like 5 years old, and that's it. But back to Goethe. If we assume that the fourth movie will be the conclusion of this story, as is my hypothesis, Rebellion and Walpurgis Rising will serve as a retelling of Part 2 of Faust, and so far, it works. I believe that Part 2 of Faust can roughly be divided into two main arcs, which I will call Arc 1 and Arc 2 for brevity's sake. Arc 1 has Faust travel back in time to Greece and marry literally the most beautiful woman who has ever lived, just for their happiness to be tragically taken away. Arc 2 instead details Faust's desperate attempts to create a just country, a small utopia of his creation, and his death and salvation through Margaret. I believe Rebellion to be a retelling of Arc 1. The fake Mitakihara in Homura's labyrinth is akin to the fake kingdom that Faust creates in order to marry Helen. I think this parallel is sound. After all, Faust appeared in Greece on the classical Walpurgis night, the night of the witches, at a party with all sorts of mythical creatures. Similarly, it is Homura's transformation into a witch that prompts the creation of the fake Mitakihara. The parallel between witches' mazes in Madoka Magica and witchcraft in Faust is also made in the original play. During the first time that Faust attends the Walpurgis night, Mephistopheles says this: "Here will we house ourselves in quiet. It is an old transmitted trade, that in the greater world the little worlds are made." This line is very reminiscent of how witches' mazes work in the universe of Madoka Magica, and especially how Homura's fake Mitakihara works. While Rebellion contains many themes and motifs that are not necessarily part of a retelling of Part 2 of Faust, some of which I discussed in my previous video essay, such as Nietzschean, Freudian, and Platonian references, I think the movie still works within the frame of Goethe's play. Just like Faust manages to find happiness again after his guilt and grief over Margaret's death, he soon loses it. Something I did not mention in my summary of Part 2 of Faust is how Euphorion, Faust's and Helen's child, dies. The boy had inherited Faust's restless temper, and similarly to Icarus, he flies up into the sky and dies. In Rebellion, Homura finds happiness after her guilt and grief over what happened to Madoka, but soon loses it. It was Faust's own nature that betrayed him when his own son inherited it. In Rebellion, it is Homura herself who has created this labyrinth, which is going to allow the incubators to find Madoka and use her. Like Helen chooses to go to the underworld to be with Euphorion, Homura would rather die in her own hell, following her cursed creation, this labyrinth, to the end, rather than give Madoka to the incubators. However, Madoka saves Homura. The ending of Rebellion marks the beginning of Arc 2 of Faust, namely Faust's quest to create a utopia. According to Wilson's analysis of Faust 2 Act 4 that I found on litcharts.com, Faust's transcendent quest to grasp an ideal of beauty has failed once and for all. His final vision of Helen is ephemeral and blows away. He must now turn his mind away from transcendence for good and learn to make his life meaningful, based on earthly endeavors. Faust doesn't want to give up the rest of his life to mindless pleasures. He wants to create a real kingdom for himself, unlike his bogus kingdom in Greece. He has learned an important lesson, that human endeavors must unfold within nature's limits. We cannot be gods, only earthly rulers. I really like this analysis, as I felt it summarized more concisely than I could what I think was going through Faust's mind when he makes his decision, and why I believe that the ending of Rebellion to be based on this part of Faust. After Homura's fake world comes to an end, she is offered to join the law of cycle. This is reminiscent of when, upon losing Helen, Faust is left with only her garments and soars into the sky with them. Just like Faust does not try to follow Helen and gets back on the ground, Homura does not follow Madoka. They both refute transcendence and seek something more real. Just like Faust, Homura sets out to create her own utopia. I believe that the fourth movie will follow the rest of the plot in Faust. The creation of Faust's utopia, the pain he still causes, his final moment of bliss, his death, and his salvation through Margaret's intercession. Now that I explained how I believe the new movie will be a retelling of the last arc of Faust, I will go through the contents of both the concept movie and the Walpurgis no Kaiten preview. I will also use the contents of my previous video essay and other materials such as production notes, etc. At the end, I will map out my idea of what the plot of the movie might look like. Ready? Perfect. Buckle up. This is long. Let's start with the concept movie. According to the entry on my anime list, created for Shaft's 40th anniversary, Mahou Shoujo Madoka Magica concept movie was a surprise reveal at the 2015 Madogatari event in Tokyo. I'm not gonna lie, back in the day I used to be obsessed with this trailer. The soundtrack, the visuals, the enigmatic lines, the atmospheres. Chef's kiss. The trailer opens to flickering lights, Kyuubi's soulless eyes, and Mami's head falling from the sky as a haunting melody plays. Madoka is shown in a tutu doing ballet. And side note, I really need to finish my script on the similarities between Princess Tutu and Utena and Madoka because oh my god, insanity. Then the lines that haunt me are spoken, in turn by Homura and Madoka.
幸せって何かしら。それは5月のうららかな日差し。それは温かな家族。それは朝ごはんの目玉焼き。けれどそのどれもが天国にはないものです。幸せって何かしら。それは誰かに名前を呼ばれること。それは誰かの名前を呼ぶこと。それは誰かが自分を思ってくれること。それは何一つ神様にはないものでした。トカゲの女の子は神様のことがとてもかわいそうに思えてきました。こうしてトカゲの女の子は神様を真っ二つに引き裂いて、その片方を天国から地上へと連れ去ってしまったのです。その残酷なまでに優しい輝き、闇の中で出会うには眩しすぎる。
This last line kind of confuses me. I remember another translation that went something like, that an act so cruel can be seen as a ray of light in the darkness was too dazzling. I could not find a transcript of the movie online, so with my rudimentary Japanese I came up with something like this, which would translate to something akin to the first translation I showed, so I don't know why the second one was so widespread at some point in fan subs. However, if there's someone out there who's watching this and is fluent in Japanese, please let me know if this is an accurate translation. Anyway, the rest of the movie shows concept art, cryptical lines, and beautiful animations. Our good old pmmm.net states that fan speculation about the plot goes as follows. Homura lied to Kyuubi at the end of Rebellion as she didn't actually create a new universe. She simply used the stolen part of the Law of Cycles to expand her witch barrier to encompass the entire universe. However, this seemingly requires an insane amount of energy to maintain, and once the maze collapses, Madoka will return to being a cosmological principle, and Homura's efforts will be for naught. Knowing this, Homura aims to trick Mami into becoming the goddess of justice, effectively replacing Madoka's soul with Mami's, so that the former could remain in the world once the devil loses her grip on the universe. I believe this to be a very valid theory, though judging from the contents shown in the new Walpurgis no Kaiten preview and my own analysis of Homura's character from a previous video essay, I think it's not exactly how events will unfold. The Walpurgis no Kaiten preview aired on the night between September 9th and 10th, 2023, during the Aniplex Online Fest. I had a high fever and was literally losing my mind. It was also like 5 or 6 a.m. A few weeks after it aired, I was still feverish. I have health issues. And I tried to record an unscripted video in which I analyzed the trailer, but I had to scrub everything, even though it was already 40 minutes long, because it was unusable. Honestly, it was quite of a wild time, and I can't believe we're already halfway into 2024, and we still have no date for the movie. And even more than that, I still haven't posted any of my thoughts yet. Anyway, The trailer opens to a ringing phone and Homura's lines.
あなたは危険と責任を引き受けられる。この世の呪いと戦える。
Then we hear children voices over the following visuals. Let's play this sequence in slow-mo and see which visuals are assigned to each line. The name Walpurgis, its form, its official name and description. Madoka's and Homura's hands holding their soul gems, one about to become a grief seed. The writing, a magical girl's worst and most powerful enemy. More Walpurgis shots. The word calamity. Homura's back as she faces Madoka at the end of Rebellion. Homura's back as she stares at the Walpurgis Knight. The words disaster, Saiyaku, is spelled in front of her, though mirrored. Homura dressed as the 15th doll, Love, looking at broken glass before becoming a witch in Rebellion. Homura about to witch out. On the second frame, we see another mirrored piece of text, which reads Keep spinning. Mawari tsuzukeru. Homura on the lone twin chair. Homura while the world is being rewritten, pomegranates flying around her, as selfishness and stubbornness run behind her. Homura blowing up the Walpurgis Knight. Homura staring at the Walpurgis Knight as she arrives, led by the elephants in her court. Again, Homura in her own labyrinth, dressed as Love. Homura pointing huge guns at a smiling Walpurgis. Homura looking over the city before the arrival of the Walpurgis. Note how so far Homura has only been shown from her back. Then we see Homura smile, the first time we see a glimpse of her face in these flashback visuals, which I find interesting to say the least, considering the first time we see her face is after we hear the word devil. A better view of Homura's smile as she is about to snatch Madoka. Homura's angry mouth as she yells, "You want to use Madoka, don't you?" at Kyubi. Homura as the devil, smiling behind more mirrored text, which reads Fool. Homura swallowing her new soul gem. Homura's expression as she talks with Madoka at the end of Rebellion. In the past, this existence brought hope, and eventually scatters curses. The law of cycle saved us. Insofar, we have only seen Homura's back and mouth. Now we also see her eyes. The next shot is of her eye moments before she snatches Madoka. Her eye as she is talking to Sayaka at the end of Rebellion. Her eye as she is talking with Madoka at the end of Rebellion. Her eye reflecting white feathers as black feathers fly around her, again as she is talking with Sayaka. Homura's eye opening in her witch labyrinth while she is begging the others to let her die there, with a small text that reads Hope. Homura's eye full of tears after she gives the red ribbons back to Madoka at the end of Rebellion. Again, Homura's eye in the labyrinth, this time from the scene where Madoka saves her. The text reads now the full sentence, Bring hope. Homura's eye as she turns to look at the Walpurgis Knight in episode 11. Now we see both her eyes. Homura's eyes as she turns to stare at Sayaka at the end of Rebellion, and again, Homura turning to face the Walpurgis Knight in episode 11. This is the first shot where we see her whole face in this black and white sequence. I want to see you one more time. Homura dressed as Love, staring at Kyubi with determination. Homura at the end of Rebellion, turning to Madoka in terror as she remembers being a god. Homura in the graveyard sequence from the second compilation movie, Eternal. Homura's opening her eyes in shock as she is about to witch out during the sequence on the twin chairs. Homura's eyes looking down while she is grounding Madoka. Homura's eyes as she is rewriting the universe in front of Sayaka. Homura's face dripping with tomato juice after having been thrown tomatoes by the Clara dolls as she speaks with Sayaka. Homura staring at Madoka in the classrooms as she asks her to go with her at the end of Rebellion. Homura's eyes glitching as she becomes the devil. This line is spoken by Madoka instead of the Clara dolls. We see Kyubi being destroyed, then two shots of Homura dressed as Love in her confrontation with Kyubi while she's learning about the truth of the fake Mitakihara. Shots of Homura versus the Walpurgis Knight in the series in between white frames. One last frame of Homura dressed as Love, with the veil still on her head at the very beginning of the confrontation. The text, "This world is for Madoka." Notice how this text is the only one on a white background. Every other piece of text was on a black one. Then, shots of Homura as she ends the call with Kyoko when she's about to test her theory of whether or not she is the witch who trapped them all into the fake Mitakihara. The call ends. I think this sequence is quite telling. After the call, we see a magical girl we don't know, thanks for letting us know in the previous sequence by the way, who looks a bit like the others. Her clothes remind me of Mami's clothes, while her hair color is like a discolored pink and her bow looks like the one that Homura was using at the end of the series and in the Wraith Arc. She has a ponytail like Kyoko, though hers is a side ponytail rather than a high one, and she's getting ready to fire an arrow. Then we see a pair of shoes, which are usually left behind when committing suicide in Japan, at the edge of a building, as this new magical girl jumps into a cloud that resembles the entrance of a witch's labyrinth, confirmed by the mouths that appear on it as she disappears. There is some text flying around the screen, which says over and over, "Who is that?" Good question. Mystery Girl now flies around, tied by or tying red ribbons around, another callback to Mami. We see her outfit better now, and it really does remind me of Mami's original outfit, though the collars and shoes are more similar to Homura's. Her hair here looks more like ashy brown than discolored pink, and we see that her hair is slightly curly. Then we also see a shot of Mitakihara City at night, and it seems like there are a lot of constructions going on. Then we see a shot of Madoka, Sayaka, and Hitomi, who are walking to school under a dreamy lighting and green arches of flowers. Sayaka is probably making the same joke that she made at the beginning of the series, teasing Madoka about not getting a boyfriend for she is Sayaka's bride.
You're both girls! Girls can't love girls! Girls can't love girls! Girls can't love girls! Hey, wait, you forgot your bag!
We see that Sayaka has bandages around her neck, under her school uniform. Madoka and Hitomi laugh at the joke with Sayaka. Then we see a full shot of Madoka, right under an arch of pink roses and surrounded by their pink petals, and her smile fades away as she looks ahead. Assuming that this cut is not misleading, Madoka's smile seems to fade away as she looks at Homura, who is smiling at her as she holds an umbrella. In my opinion, her smile looks fake. She is standing in the middle of a fountain and holds the umbrella despite it being sunny. The perspective makes it look like the water may be coming from the umbrella, though it is clearly part of the fountain, which is a very nice visual metaphor. Anyway, while Madoka, Sayaka and Hitomi's uniform seems the same as before, Homura's is different. Her shirt is black instead of white, and she is wearing short black leggings. It's the same uniform that she's wearing in the poster, which I will discuss soon. Finally, we get a glimpse of Kyoko, Mami, and Sayaka in their new magical girl outfits. They seem mostly the same except for a few changes. After the shots of Kyoko, Mami, and Sayaka, we see Kyubi's eyes staring into the camera. They are less circular than before, which could mean nothing. A lot of papers are scattered into the sky at sunset. At the end of the trailer, we see a tower made of books and chains, shot by shot. Someone on puelamagi.net uploaded a full picture of the tower, and I spent a full hour identifying all the Clara dolls that we see on it. If someone has already done it, please don't tell me, because I will cry over all this wasted effort. One of the reasons why it took me so long to identify the Clara dolls is that some designs were changed. For some of them, it was just some minor tweaks, but others look completely different. For example, Vanity now looks like a cat, which I guess works with the meaning of her name. You know how I love the Clara dolls, and I would love to talk about all of them, but for now I want to focus only on 3 of them. The 3 that are at the bottom of the tower, who are staring into the camera when we get a closer shot of Homura on her throne in her new magical girl costume. The 3 dolls are Blockhead/Gullible, Liar, and Selfishness. I find it telling that these feelings are shown as we see Homura on her throne, visibly exhausted and impatient and irritated. Is she feeling the consequences of what she considers her stupid, selfish choices, as she lies to everyone, including herself, maybe? Who knows? Or are they just a visual that tell us, the audience, that she is acting in a stupid, selfish way and lying about it? Important to notice, there are 3 Homuras on the tower. I believe one of them to be the 15th Clara doll, Love. I talked about her already in my previous video essay, and I will talk about her in more detail soon. The one at the bottom of the tower is definitely post-rebellion Homura in my opinion, but I cannot really tell who the third one might be. Maybe a copy the Homura made of herself to help her govern this world? Who knows? Either way, I find it curious that there are 3 Homuras on the tower, as throughout the promotional materials I can only identify 2. So I'm also thinking it might just be a visual reference for Homura being on the tower, because the 3 Homuras are shown in 3 different shots. The last line spoken in the trailer, first by the Clara dolls and then by Homura, is, "And so, let the curtains rise on tonight's dream." I find this so interesting considering how in the fake Mitakihara, dreams are the entities that the girls are fighting against instead of witches or wraiths, and how, as we already discussed, this movie is a play and the Walpurgis night comes, staging a play. Around a month after this first preview was uploaded, a second one was uploaded on YouTube. It looks exactly the same as the first one, but at the end we get a glimpse at Madoka's new magical girl costume in a very nicely animated transformation sequence. Her costume looks very similar to the one that she was wearing in the concept movie trailer, and now we finally have the new version of the Holy Quintet's costumes. Here are some differences I noticed, and please consider that except for Madoka and partially Homura, we can only see the upper parts of the girls' costumes, so we cannot know about changes in the lower area of their costumes. For Kyoko, I think they added more details on her sleeves. I also see the white outline going down instead of around her sleeves, with the dark underneath showing already under her armpits. Mami lost her yellow ribbon, but she still has the brown straps around her shoulders. She does not seem to be wearing a corset anymore, and her chest area is better hidden under a piece of cloth. The fastening, collar, and collar are reminiscent of her old outfit. I have no idea what this type of garment is called, but I have seen a couple of characters in Genshin Impact wear something similar, namely Shanhe and Kujo Sora. I kind of like this new design choice because it hides her chest better, which I appreciate considering she's like 15. Under this new shirt is a yellow top. The shoulders, sleeves, gloves, and hat though seem unaltered and very similar to the old costume. Sayaka is the one who seems to have undergone the most dramatic costume changes. She's still wearing her white cape, symbol of a hero, though the fastening looks slightly different. She is also still wearing her fortissimo hairpin. However, her face is completely covered with bandages and only her right eye is visible. The bandages are tied together on the right side of her head in an elaborate bow. Her sleeves and gloves also look different. As soon as I saw Sayaka's new costume, I was reminded of the concept trailer, where she had a mask instead of bandages. Either way, in my opinion, it is quite clear that a certain someone does not want her to talk.
だとしてもこれだけは忘れない。明美穂村、あんたが悪魔だってことは。せめて普段は仲良くしましょうね。あまり喧嘩をしているとあの子にまで嫌われるわよ。
Homura's costume has stayed mostly the same, except in the area around her upper chest where she's showing more skin, her shoulders uncovered, similarly to how her devil costume is more revealing. She's still wearing her little bow and the shirt's collar seems the same. The leggings seem to have lost the purple diamond shapes. She seems to still be wearing her black headband. Madoka is the only one out of the Holy Quintet whose costume we get to see in its entirety, front and back. Madoka's outfit seems to have changed the most drastically. I wouldn't even say that Madoka's costume has changed drastically, I would say it's a completely different costume. While the color palette is still the same as before, white with different shades of pink, the costume is completely different, though it is basically the same that was seen in the concept movie trailer. Compared to her magical girl costume, the only unchanged elements are her fluffy white underskirt, the bow around her neck, her socks, and her hair ribbons. Some elements are visually similar but still very different, such as the pink part of her skirt, her red shoes, and her gloves. The rest of the costume is completely changed. Around her abdomen is a lock, which I believe Homura to be involved with. During the Aniplex Online Fest 2023, they revealed both the trailer and the official movie poster. Before moving on with speculations, I'd like to briefly talk about the poster. In the trailer, Homura is heard talking on a phone call, and the movie poster features a gigantic phone receiver with a lizard head and a spine inside the handle and two Homuras. One is smiling right at us, while the other one is giving us her back. The Homura facing the audience is wearing the same clothes as the Homura with the umbrella in the trailer, and her pose is almost playful. Her smile is directed at us rather than to the other Homura, and it almost looks like she's looking down on us. The Homura with her back turned away looks almost wary of the other, as if she's ready to fight her, though we cannot see her expression. Her tights and bow are different than the ones she wore at the end of Rebellion. In the background, we see Madoka in her new magical girl costume, facing away from the viewer. Another element I wanted to discuss is that of the lizard. The lizard keeps coming up, I swear to God. In Rebellion, we see the lizard multiple times. We see her as the symbol of Devil Homura. We see her in this new trailer multiple times, and we see it in the poster. I had some trouble figuring out what lizards mean in Japanese folklore, so I'm kind of leaning towards the idea that the reason why Homura is represented by a lizard is because, first of all, lizards are not animals that are usually associated with nice things, as they are reptiles. They have cold blood, and also their ability to regenerate. When you cut off a lizard's tail, they can regenerate it. And similarly, Homura's time travel powers kind of give her the ability to regenerate and stuff like that. I don't know, man. The thing is, they use the lizard also as a symbol of the Drosselmeyer in Princess Tutu, so more research is needed. But this is for the next essay. Okay, that was a doozy. Finally, I can go on to tell you what I speculate might go down in this upcoming movie. If I had to map out a plot for Walpurgis rising following Rebellion, I would imagine that in the movie, Homura will be hard at work maintaining this new world. I bet the movie will open to Madoka at home, just like it did in episode 1 and at the beginning of Rebellion. Madoka wakes up after a weird dream, wakes her mom up, they get ready together, she's late for school, opening credits roll. All will be normal until nothing is. Just like Rebellion flipped all our expectations and confused us, I think the first act of the new movie will try to accomplish something similar. Then, throughout the movie, Homura will make mistakes, hurt people, just like Faust in the final part of the play. Even though Faust never wanted to harm the elderly couple, his greed for their piece of land and his obsession with creating his utopia blinded him, resulting in the violent death of the two. I think the theory of Homura bluffing, having full control of this new reality, is quite plausible, as she should have the means for such a huge bluff. In the Wraith Arc, it is alluded that after Madoka rewrote the universe, Homura gained the power of memory manipulation. This kind of magic would explain how she managed to convince everyone of this new reality, especially if this new reality was not the real world, but a fake world of her creation.
でもミキさやか、あなたは私に立ち向かえるの？今でも徐々に記憶は変わりつつあるでしょ？
Her time manipulation magic is stored in the shield that got destroyed in the Wraith Arc, and if we decide to consider that as canon, QB still has a piece of it. Even if we decide to disregard the actual events of the Wraith Arc as canon, the idea of Homura's time manipulation magic being stored in the shield is already quite canon, and in fact the shield does not show up in any post-rebellion shots in the trailer or promotional images. Another aspect of the Wraith Arc I want to mention is the concept of the Wraith taking the shape of a magical girl after having absorbed Homura's memories and feelings. We see multiple Homuras throughout the trailer. Similarly, in the Wraith Arc, Wraiths are able to take on the appearance of magical girl, and we see them do it in the case of Homura, Sayaka, Gyoko, and I think Mami too. Moreover, in Rebellion, Homura meets a version of herself that lives inside the shield. Incidentally, the outfit of Shield Homura looks very similar to that of Love/I, the 15th doll. The 15th unknown doll that I had discussed in my previous essay, the same outfit that Homura wears in her confrontation with Kyubi in Rebellion. Shield Homura tried to tempt Homura into releasing a witch into the world, so that Madoka would descend from the sky to deal with it and Homura may see her again. Homura refuses. She decides to travel back in time one last time, despite the fact that this would mean losing all proof of Madoka's existence. In deciding this, Homura demands, "Lend me power, not as the shield that protects Madoka, but as the power that smites anyone who threatens her." This line really explains why Homura is using the incubators to suffer the curses of mankind instead of magical girls. Shield Homura actually does not disappear once the shield breaks, and we see her holding Homura inside her soul gem, implying that she is the darkness corrupting it. I believe Shield Homura is the one who betrayed Madoka at the end of Rebellion. In the Wraith Arc, Shield Homura claims to be the crystallization of Homura's feelings for Madoka, which we learn are love, which is the one emotion that completely corrupts Homura's soul gem. Shield Homura being love would explain her outfit and the decoration on Homura's new soul gem. I think she's the 15th doll, Love herself. The doll I said would be the key to the 4th movie, and I will never stop screaming if I was right, by the way. Her physical existence would also explain why in the preview and poster we seem to see two Homuras who wear different outfits. One seems to smile more and the other seems exhausted. I think both of them are managing the new reality, and Love/I might take Kyubi's role as a mirror of Mephistopheles, acting as a corrupted advisor as Faust/Homura builds their utopia. I do think the utopia that Homura is building in Walpurgis Rising is not working out as she intended, and I think the mysterious new girl that we see in the trailer will be Homura's sacrificial lamb. As I mentioned earlier, a popular theory that was spawned by the concept movie trailer that was Homura was trying to make Mami into a replacement for Madoka. I think the new girl might fulfill this role instead. She looks like a mix of Mami, Homura, and Madoka for a reason. The girl could have been created by Homura or even scouted, maybe through the phone calls. The thing is, we all know Madoka. If she finds out about any of this, she won't be happy, and might even resent Homura, and Homura knows this. Eventually, the movie will reach a climax wherein Homura will probably reach out, maybe because of a conflict with Madoka, or Love/I will manage to sway her, or maybe because this was all too much energy to spend on a fake world. Or maybe nothing like that happens and still a witch spawns. Point is, I have no idea how this will go down, obviously, but I do think Homegirl will witch out. The current Homura is not only Devil Homura with world rewriting/creating powers, but also the Homura who has memory manipulation powers and maybe even time manipulation powers. The witch spawning from such a Homura won't be Homu Lily. Instead, it will be Miss Walpurgis Night herself. Homura is actually the Walpurgis is actually a super popular theory online ever since the original series came out, and I think it is highly likely that this is what will be shown in the movie, the origin of Walpurgis Night, though I do think that Madoka will be involved in some way. Okay, now I would like you to wind this video back to the Walpurgis Night segment and take in all that information again. I will put a timestamp. The fact that Homura might have been the Walpurgis all along is the kind of soul-annihilating bullshit that only Urobuchi would pull, to be honest. With her godlike power and the ability to cross timelines and manipulate memories, I think it would stand to reasons that the Walpurgis would have existed before Madoka eliminated all witches. In my previous video essay, I juxtaposed Junko's speech to Madoka about making a big mistake to help a friend with Madoka and Homura's storylines. I think this will be a key issue in the 4th movie. I mentioned already that I think Urobuchi really likes Western philosophy. A key topic in Western philosophy is that of dialectic. a form of reasoning based upon the dialogue of arguments and counter-arguments, advocating propositions, theses, and counter-proposition, antitheses, to reach a synthesis. The way I interpret this series, Madoka is the thesis and Homura is our antithesis. Truth will be reached only through their synthesis. This is why I believe the Walpurgis to be a mix of both Madoka and Homura. This would make sense from a philosophical and narrative perspective, and also it would explain the design of the Walpurgis, whose silhouette completes Gretchen's. Another theory that I have for the Walpurgis is that she is actually Devil Homura's witch form, leading the souls of the other magical girls who could not come to be in her new reality. After all, the Walpurgis Knights Familiar are these colorful, fairy-like creatures who are also shown in the concept movie and who originally were supposed to look like that magical girl. In any case, salvation from the Walpurgis Knight will come from dialogue and understanding between Homura and Madoka, in my opinion. Both girls are still so young and both struggle with self-esteem and their sense of self. Madoka is surrounded by amazing women and she feels worthless compared to them. Her only means of self-worth is through self-sacrifice, as she feels like she has nothing else to offer. Madoka defines her self-worth based on how useful she is to others. On the other hand, Homura defines her self-worth through Madoka. Unlike Madoka, Homura grew up completely isolated and has the trauma of having been hospitalized in her formative years. Whereas Madoka developed her self-esteem issues by comparing herself to those who loved her, Homura developed hers from extreme loneliness. Homura's means of self-worth is through her only friend, Madoka, the first and only person who Homura feels has ever loved her. To be loved by Madoka, to be of use to her, is for Homura to have worth, and not be the weird, weak, inept transfer student. They are stuck in a balance. Madoka cannot accept herself unless she sacrifices herself, and Homura cannot accept herself unless Madoka is there to define and love her. I love codependent toxic cutie. As I already mentioned, the incubators use teenage girls as energy sources because they are humans with the highest emotional potential. After all, Hell is a teenage girl and all that. Being a girl under the patriarchy is traumatic. As your body starts changing, you suddenly become sexualized, exploited, and get ignored and ridiculed. You hear the way men talk about your body and understands that your body is not actually yours. On average, teenage girls are more likely to suffer from eating disorders, self-harm, and mental health issues such as depression, suicidality, dissociation, and low self-esteem. Becoming an adult brings with it the ability to compromise and understand. And in my opinion, Junko is the key to understand the movie, as she is the adult role model of the series. Junko Kaname is a working mother whose husband is a stay-at-home dad who takes care of the children and the home. Madoka's family flips patriarchal expectations on their head. Junko has a successful career. She stays out drinking late with her colleagues and is a wise and loving mother to Madoka. In her speech to Madoka, she suggests making a big mistake to balance out someone's need to be in the right. In other words, she suggests an antithesis to counter a thesis in order to reach a synthesis. Adults tend to be less emotional than teenagers, hopefully in most cases, and this emotional maturity shows in the ability to compromise and see the shades of grey that make up morality, rather than breaking everything down into either good or evil. At the end of Rebellion, Homura sees herself as evil incarnate, but the whole series has been telling us that nothing is ever 100% black or white, right or wrong, true or false, good or evil. While Homura sees herself as evil and Madoka as good, the truth lies somewhere in between. The girls will only be able to reach a synthesis after they accept that neither of them is right and neither of them is wrong, when they both find a way to love themselves and self-determine themselves without needing external validation. In other words, synthesis will be reached only if Madoka and Homura mature, grow up, love each other. In my previous essay, I stressed the importance of the 15th doll, Love/I. In writing this essay, I realized I might have been quite right. If the second Homura that we see in the preview really is the 15th doll, then it will come down to her. I do believe that Love/I will be there to help, Or not, Madoka and Homura reach an understanding and grow up. After all, I do believe that love has always been the driving force at the center of this show, and I do believe that understanding comes from love. And I see this synthesis leading the movie to end either in futile tragedy or in redemption. We all know that Urobuchi does not like happy endings. However, Faust ends on a positive note, with Faust's soul being saved and led to heaven by Margaret. I hope that this is where the movie will go. I'm not saying that it should be a happily ever after kind of ending, but I do hope that Homura and Madoka will be together just like Faust and Margaret. And now for fun, let's match up my theory with the previous opening sequence. Can you accept the risks and responsibilities? Can you fight against the curse of this world? Here we see Homura in front of the planetarium, which in Utena was used by Akio as a metaphor of someone projecting false reality, probably contracting the new unknown magical girl to prime her to take Madoka's place. It's a secret. This line, paired with the visuals of the Walpurgis, leads me to think that the secret is that this is a false world, and the Walpurgis will be born from it or because of it. Don't tell anyone, not even to Madoka. There's one thing you must do, that's love. These lines, paired with the visuals of Homura dressed as Love/I, tell us that love, the missing doll, truly is the emotion and driving force at the center of it all. Love is the problem and the solution. What nonsense. Homura's selfishness and stubbornness and compulsion to repeat lead her to focus only on this utopia and keeping it afloat. Devil. The visuals for this line show us both the Walpurgis and Homura hinting that they might be the same entity. A magical girl I don't know. I think this line refers to the new magical girl, and the visuals hint at her role in taking Madoka's place. Bring hope. Just bring hope. This might refer to how in this movie, Homura might be trying to bring hope back to Madoka, give her her old life back, finally fulfilling her role as Madoka's savior. Goodbye. Release the girl. Release the new magical girl, or release Madoka from this fake reality? Who knows? Hey, Homura-chan. This might hint at how Madoka might interfere with Homura's plans, in my opinion. My best friend. This, in my opinion, hints at the love between Madoka and Homura and the synthesis that they will reach together. Despite the fact that the official website mentions that this movie will be the beginning of a new chapter, I still believe that this fourth movie will be the end of the Faust retelling and, in a way, complete the story that started in 2011. Maybe something new will spawn from this, something beyond Faust. However, I do think that the Walpurgis Rising will tie up the Faustian storyline. At least I hope, because that would make the most sense. I would be lying if I said I am confident in my speculations. After all, Rebellion is infamous for having taken our expectations and toyed with them, flipping the cards on the audience in the most creative, unhinged way possible. I am personally biased towards Rebellion as it is my favorite movie. I consider it a perfect movie, and I am genuinely just as terrified as I am hyped about the upcoming movie. After all, how can anything live up to Rebellion? I will be going into the movie theater with as little expectation as possible, as I will know I will be taken for a wild, wild, wild ride. I want to end this essay by quoting my own Tumblr post. I wrote this one just 2 days after the Aniplex live. I still had a very high fever and I was losing my mind. Yet, I still think I managed to put into words my feelings for this series and what I think its heart is. Love and hope and kindness being the running motifs in Madoka Magica and the forces that can single-handedly save and curse someone. Madoka's love and kindness being what saves Homura from her suicidal tendencies, but also what ultimately dooms Madoka to die at the end of the Walpurgis night. Homura's love for Madoka and her undying hope to save her what curses her to repeat time and traumatize herself over and over again, while also increasing Madoka's karma and by default, cursing her too. Madoka's refusal for Homura's hope to be in vain, being the driving force that grants hope to all, but also ends Madoka's existence. Sayaka's love for Kyosuke and her altruistic, heroic ideals being what gives her confidence and hope at first, but when confronted with misogyny and unrequited love, even when you told yourself you would not expect him to love you back just because you sacrificed yourself for him, being what curses her. Gyoko's love for her family being the catalyst that leads it to break apart, because in all her childlike devotion to her father, she couldn't see him for who he really was. Mami's kindness, forcing her to put up a brave face and resulting in her demise. But it all does not end in despair. Sayaka's newfound love for Kyoko being the reason Kyoko is no longer lost and angry and alone. Mami's kindness finding a recipient in Nagisa to whom she can finally be a parental figure. In one universe, Nagisa was the one to end Mami's existence, but now they can both heal and not be alone anymore. Madoka's love for Homura encompassing time and space and saving her every time over and over again, even when Homura does not want it, even when she refuses her hand. Madoka will always reach for her and find her and save her and show her kindness, even when Homura thinks she does not deserve any, even when she's willing to die in her own personal hell. Homura's love being, yes, what commits the unforgivable sin and tears God apart, but also it is only through her selfishness and terrible act that the others get a shot at a normal childhood/adolescence. Kyoko and Sayaka can be together at last, Mami and Nagisa find each other, Madoka can live with her family again. This is what I hope will be explored in the next movie, this intrinsic relationship between hope and despair, love as a lifeline and a curse, kindness and selfishness coexisting and influencing each other. I hope the girls manage to finally tip the scale between hope and despair towards the light. I hope Madoka's love will keep on reaching Homura even when she thinks she's evil incarnate, a devil, even when she thinks her existence is antithetical to Madoka's true nature, even when she thinks herself beyond salvation. I hope they get a shot at happiness together this time. Thank you so much for bearing with me for this whole video essay, and to those who are here from the previous video essay, I'm so sorry it took so long to post another one, and I thank you so much for your patience. As I mentioned, I was writing another video essay, it was almost done, and then I started writing this one, which turned into a 33 pages monster, and I was planning on doing it this summer 2024, but I was a bit stupid and I left a couple of uni courses to finish by the end of July. Then I had some family drama, and then now in a week as of this recording I will be starting my first archaeological excavation, and I'm super excited, but I had some preliminary assignments to do for it. So, quite a busy summer, but I managed to record this. Now I will just have to edit it. Yeah, it was fun. And thank you so much for listening and tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed. And please remember, I might be 100% completely, utterly wrong about everything I've said, but also that's the fun of video essay and meta-analysis. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope I can post new AMVs soon and finish the other video essay soon. but I will make no promises this time. See you next time. Bye. Well, hello, this is Mimi Kuno from the future. I just checked my calendar and I recorded this video essay on August 12th and it's currently September 16th. As I've mentioned, I've had a busy summer. The reason why I'm recording a new piece is because this morning there was the new Aniplex Online Fest 2024 and they released the new trailer. And I have school very soon, but I wanted to record some fresh, unscripted thoughts on the trailer because it has a lot of elements that I think tie in with what I've previously analyzed or speculated. I am sleep deprived because I found out about this live only 3 days ago, and only yesterday, like last night, I was like, oh my god, I need to finish editing this stupid video essay, because what if they confirm or deny something that I've mentioned it, then I would look like an idiot posting my video essay after this new piece of information, whatever that is gonna come out. I couldn't manage to finish editing it in one night. I did finish to edit all the audio of my voice, which is usually the worst part for me because I feel a lot of secondhand embarrassment from hearing my own voice. So now I just have to add the visuals and I will do it in a very simple way, I think. Anyway, I ramble. It's very early in the morning and I have school soon. But I want to say some thoughts. So the trailer opens with, let me look at it shot by shot on another screen. Okay, so the trailer, like the new trailer, opens to Homura falling, and she's the Homura who has the dark shirt under her jacket, and she has the new black headband, which I think symbolizes that she's not actually Homura, she's Love, because in all the promotional materials I've seen, Love is usually depicted in such clothes, and she's falling with some weird background. Then there's Madoka and Homura dancing, and it's very important to notice. I had my mental breakdown about this clip already, so I will be calm now, explaining my analysis of it. But Homura's eyes are pink; they're not purple, and I think that's Love dancing. I think that is the 15th doll. I don't think that's Homura. I think that's Love. In a way, it is Homura because it's Homura's feeling of love for Madoka incarnate. Either way, it's not the actual Homura, it's Love, or that's what I think. That's also hinted at by the fact that her uniform is different than Madoka's, and from what I've seen, when I see the trailer, when I see Homura, she's usually wearing that weird, sorry, that's my dog, she's usually wearing a kind of different outfit than this black. Anyway, I think that's Love, hinted by her different eye color and the outfit. Then there's Clara doll, and just from memory, without checking it up, I think that's Ibari, I think that's Pride, the first one. And she's holding up a mirror that's actually looking not at herself, but ahead of her. And that's the eye that I think we've seen in Rebellion a few times, the eye that opens. That eye opened when Madoka came to save Homura from her own hell. I will probably put the scene up there. And Ibari has her eyes closed. Then there's a shot of someone like Homura, probably, looking in the mirror. She has the normal uniform. Now the shirt is white. The mirror says dummy Venus, dummy spelled in a very funny way, and then Venus. I find this amazing. The fact that she's looking at herself like with some pride right after Pride was shown, and she's like touching her face as if she doesn't recognize herself. So I think that might also be a Clara doll becoming, like, looking like Homura. Then there's some staircases, balloons. Let me slip forward. Oh, this is the scene that made me have a breakdown as soon as I woke up. But Homura is falling from the sky in a very like Icarus, got too close to the sun kind of way. euphorium, or in, euphorium, like Faust, like, very Paradise Lost, very Icarus, very euphorium, very Faust. She's falling from the sky, black feathers are flying everywhere. Then let me go forward. This is a very beautiful shot. Then there's Madoka eating and smiling. Then there's this new magical girl with green hair, which, by the way, I love her design. She's super cute. And she is drinking tea, and the teacup contains a world inside it. I'm not gonna speculate about that on a sleep-deprived brain, but I love it. Then what else? Oh, Nagisa. I'm so glad to see Nagisa again. I love her so much. She's my baby. And a friend. Probably a friend of... Maybe a friend of Nagisa's or something like that. Then there's Sayaka walking in front of a statue. Sorry, my cat and my dog are just wreaking havoc right now behind me. There's Sayaka walking in front of a statue, which I don't feel like I have the mental energy to speculate on. Mami eating cake, probably. Maybe she's eating with Madoka. Beautiful cake shop behind her, whatever. Pillows exploding, white feathers. Kyoko with cake. Again, cake. Then there's a book opening with some of the runes. And then there's Sayaka in the theater that we see her in at the end of the series. And I find it really interesting that she's in her magical girl costume. We again see the bandages, meaning they're probably a permanent feature of her new costume. And I find it interesting that at first it's all dark. Then there's now that I'm going through it very slowly, there's like a flash of light, and we see the mermaid tail of her witch form, and then she covers her eyes, and because the flash. And I think that's really interesting. Maybe she's getting some memories of being a witch or something like that. Then we see QB on the shoulder of a magical girl who has the black uniform shirt, which I've only seen used by Homura when I think she's love. So I don't know what this means. At first I thought it might be Mami, but it's not. Now that I am looking at a frame. Whoever this is, a new magical girl, like the green-haired one. Then there's this very cool shot of someone's arm bleeding. And if we see it very slowly, we see there's a teacup, a rusted knife, and the arm. The first thing we see is that the knife inserted in the arm, actually there's a lizard underneath it. And the lizard disappears, the blood kind of explodes and forms some kind of lock, I would say, that's protecting the arm from actually getting harmed. So I think this is Homura's arm, and someone maybe maybe she was at tea time with Mami, maybe there were words exchanged, maybe Mami understood her threat and kind of tried to stab her. But, Homura is right now the ruler of reality, so she can't be harmed. Then there's this beautiful shot that I'm already completely obsessed with, which is like, it looks like, I'm gonna research it and put it in when I actually edit it, but it reminds me of a certain painting, a very specific painting, I think a fresco, and it reminds me a lot again of Paradise Lost and Faust, Ascension into Heaven. I really have to admit, I love how the first thought I had watching this trailer was, oh my god, Paradise Lost. And once again, I haven't mentioned it before, but it's quite clear that the Paradise Lost vibe is what they're going for with this preview. And I really love it, and I really think it's very, it fits very well with this series. Anyway, this is a beautiful shot that looks like Ascension into Heaven, so I'm really thinking of, Faust. And then we see this black feather. Again, Paradise Lost, falling from heaven, but also could be meaning ascending into heaven. It depends on how you look at it, which I think it's also a very nice visual metaphor. Are we going up? Is Homura going up and her feather is like falling towards us, or has Homura just fallen from the sky? Then let's go forward slowly. We see the title, and then it says it's coming in winter 2025. So now I'm gonna go. Now if my cat and my dog stop meowing and walking around and drinking water and disturbing my recording, I will go through the sentences, and then I have to get ready to go to school. So the lines are spoken by Madoka. I think, I'm pretty sure that's Yuki Aoi. And so she has a very robotic, kind of creepy voice, as if she's been forced to say these things, as if she's like some kind of doll or robot who's been made to speak these words.
私は希望とともに希望はあなたとともにあなたと叶えた奇跡はきっと私たちを導いてくれる
Okay, let's start with the first two. I will go with hope, and hope will go with you. I think these lines are both very telling. Once again, this is completely unscripted. I'm sleep deprived, and I don't want to overanalyze this because I don't want to post this essay in a year. So I'm not gonna like research or anything. Also because, as I said, I have to go to school. But I think these lines are both really, really telling, because they tie into what I said before about how Madoka and Homura are the thesis and the antithesis. So I will go with hope, that might be Madoka, and hope will go with you, that might be Homura, and whatever that means. Then there are the lines, the miracle that I achieved with you will surely guide us. So this reminds me of the Wraith Arc, when Homura, like Shield Homura, I think it was Shield Homura, mentions that the real miracle that was achieved was not how Madoka gave up her whole existence to ascend to godhood and save everyone, but it was actually the fact that Homura remembers Madoka. That was the miracle. The fact that Homura's feeling crystallized as love, and she was able to remember Madoka even when she no longer existed and she had never existed. That was the miracle that Madoka and Homura talk about in the Wraith Arc, or maybe it was Shield Homura. Either way, I think this refers to that. I think what Madoka means when she says, the miracle I achieved with you will surely guide us, even if it's just Madoka speaking, or if it's Homura feeding her lines, or if it's love feeding Madoka lines. I think these two lines are key. That's what I mean. So I think what they mean by miracle is actually Homura's love. That's the miracle. That's the miracle they achieve together, is Homura's love being so strong that it can transcend time and space. And that miracle will guide them. Where? I don't know. Hopefully heaven, hopefully a happy ending. I don't know. Who am I to say? Either way, I've never done an unscripted video. So let me know if in the future you might want more of this, because it's definitely faster to edit, or at least I hope. I will see. I'll tell you if it's faster or not. Either way, I'm losing my mind. I am considering skipping school so that I can stay home and post this, but yeah, I will try to post this in the next few days. Please bear with me. I am trying my best. I have a very, very busy, messy life, and I have ADHD, so yes.